Another CDL major in the books, and with it, a ton of storylines, including the Atlanta Faze regaining their throne. There was a little bit of a mini losers bracket run there from OpTic, and a couple teams that many would consider to be down towards the bottom of the power rankings that seem to be either making moves or spinning their wheels in this one. We're going to go through the power rankings from number 12 all the way to number 1. As always, in the comments, let me know who you agree with, who you disagree with, where you might put some teams that might differ from where I have them. But without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into our number 12 team, which you can probably guess is the Paris Legion. Right now, I have them down from where they were a few weeks ago in that number 12 spot. If you just go through the stats, 5-13 record with a 25-43 map record, what seems to have been the mode that was saving them the majority of the year, that hardpoint, they have now fallen to 8th, and of course, S&D in control, they're there at 11th. They went ahead, they made the roster move, got rid of Fire, brought in Temp, but it just hasn't been going well for them. And sometimes you make moves, and sometimes those moves just don't end up panning out. Look at their recent losses. Lost against London, lost against Toronto, lost against Minnesota. They do have that recent victory against Florida, but that was from a time where Florida really wasn't playing great. So it's not like you've seen sustained success from them since they've made the roster move. So right now, I'm just not really sure what to think of Paris, which is why we have them right there at number 12. And we move on to our 11th ranked team, the Seattle Surge. This is another squad where they made the roster move to bring in Decimate, and I thought it was going to be the difference that they needed, and it just hasn't worked out that way. I did have them up at number 9. Since then, I moved them down 2 spots. 4-15 record with 26-49 overall map count, and this is a problem with a lot of these teams down towards the bottom, is that if you go through and you look at their hardpoint rank and you look at their S&D rank and you look at their control ranks, they just don't have a game mode to fall back on, right? If you just think about hardpoint, if you can get that map 1 victory and you can get a map 4 victory, anything can happen in the search and destroy. Same thing with S&D. If you're a good S&D team, you can win that map 2 and just try to get lucky and steal a respawn, and you got a chance to win a match when it goes to that map 5. But they just don't really have much working for them at all. Look at their recent matches. 1-3 loss to LAG, lost to London, lost to Atlanta, lost to New York Subliners. Most people probably expect the last 2 losses, but if you want to start rising up these power rankings, you have to get wins against teams like LAG and London, and they're just not making it happen. Which one of those teams we're moving on to is in the 10th ranked spot, the Los Angeles Guerrillas. I also had them in 10th a few weeks ago. I don't know. They're just another squad that seems to be spinning their wheels. Right when they made the roster move to bring in Cheen, it seemed like that was the move that they needed, right? It seemed like he brought the vibes. They were able to get a victory as soon as he came on board, and you thought, okay, we'll see what happens here, but it just hasn't been panning out. Look at their record, 7-14 with a 34-49 map count. Like I was saying for the Seattle Surge, the only difference with this squad is they do have that S&D mode where, you know what, they can win map 2, try to steal the control maybe, and then if it goes to a map 5, anything can happen. But even as of late, they've been losing those map 5s. If you look at the recent matches, sure, they lost to Chicago before getting that win in the first round against Seattle. But right before the major started, 2-3 loss to Florida, 2-3 loss to Minnesota, 2-3 loss to Dallas. So they are going to map 5, where you figure if that's their best mode, they should be getting those victories, but they're just not making it happen. So we have LAG at 10th, which brings us to the team that has risen up the ranks the most in this power rankings, the London Royal Ravens. I thought, as many others did, that this squad was just down and out. I just wasn't sure that they were going to be able to make a roster move. And in fact, I saw on the timeline today that they're even thinking of bringing Alex back in the mix. So they're thinking of making another roster move, bringing in Alex for Zaptius. Who knows how that's going to work out? I like that teams are making moves. I'm just not sure if this team has had enough time to gel. They've been getting really impressive wins, and it's just that saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And it seems like maybe another roster move might be a little bit too early, but overall record 6-14 with a 32-47 map count. Control has been their best mode throughout the year. You look at the recent matches over on the right. Sure, they got knocked out of the major with that 0-3 loss to LA Thieves, but before that, 3-0 win against Minnesota to knock them out. 3-1 win against Paris to knock Paris out. They got a 3-1 win against Seattle. And then they took Atlanta to a game 5. I believe they lost in round 10. But this is just a squad that is taking strides. I would like to see what happens if they stick with it and let them play together a little bit more. But at least from what we see right now, it doesn't appear like that's going to happen. And with that, we'll move on to our 8th ranked squad, which is down a little bit. I think I've had them as high as 4 this year, but right now, the Minnesota Rockers just are not getting it done. I have them down 3 spots from where they were just 3 weeks ago. Now, again, this is another squad that made a roster move. Accuracy has had like a 0.84 this stage or somewhere in there, I believe. So they put accuracy to the bench. They brought in Major Maniac. Of course, it's great if you have somebody like Major Maniac on your bench that you can bring in. We'll see if it ends up working out. It can't get much worse. Not that it's even bad, right? It's not that they're playing bad. It's just they need to make a change, and that is the most obvious. That is the easiest change to make, and we'll see if it ends up working out. But as we go through and look at this 8-10 record with 32-40 map count overall, as has been the story all year, this squad just hasn't been able to get it together in hardpoint. Their S&D rank, they're right in the middle of the pack. They're one of the better control teams, especially if they play on raid, but they need to start winning more hardpoints. And as soon as they do, if that happens, this is a squad that can absolutely contend against the top 5, top 6, top 4 in the league. They just got to figure it out and iron out those tiny little details. Look at the recent matches. Had the 0-3 loss against London to knock them out of the tournament. Had the 1-3 loss against Dallas that kept them from being in the winner's bracket. But before that, got a win over LAG, got a win over Paris. They were the only team in stage 3 in their group to take a map off of Toronto. So it's there. They just have to get a little bit more consistent. And I do think that'll probably happen going into the next stage with Major Maniac. As we move on to number 7, this is another squad that people are just a little bit unsure of, as am I, and that's the Dallas Empire. I had Dallas ranked 7th a few weeks ago when I did this, going through the rankings, 14-11 record overall with a 52-50 map count. Hardpoint historically has been a mode that has saved them, but they haven't looked great at that mode since bringing in Fellow, S&D 9th, Control 7th. Look at their recent matches. Got knocked out of the tournament by Chicago, got knocked down into the loser's bracket of the Stage 3 Major by Atlanta. Both of those were 0-3 losses. They did get a 3-1 win over Minnesota and a 3-2 win over LAG, but look at that match against Florida. Florida has been coming on of late as of the last week or so. So when you look at Dallas, they seem to still be beating the teams that are 12, 11, 10, 9, somewhere in that range. But now they're starting to really struggle against those upper echelon squads. And I'm not quite sure how they turn it around. So I have Dallas at 7, which brings us to the LA Thieves at number 6. And this is exactly where I had them before. 13-12 record overall with a very even map count at 48-48. The thing with LA Thieves is that depending on the day, Hardpoint is ranked 6th, S&D is 6th, Control is 5th, and this is a squad that is just going to continue to figure it out. If you look at like Dallas versus LA Thieves, not quite sure how Dallas is going to get their victories, but you bring in Hugh and you start to develop some more strategy, some more team morale, some more comfort amongst those 4 players. I think this is a squad that can really turn it on over the 4th and 5th stages. Look at their recent matches over on the right-hand side. 1-3 loss to Toronto. Did get a win over London, and they have that win from earlier on in the group play against Chicago, but losses to Florida, losses to New York Subliners. We'll see what ends up happening moving forward. I just have a little bit more confidence in the LA Thieves than I do Dallas Empire. Those squads right in the middle. So 7th, Dallas Empire, 6th, LA Thieves, and 5th, the Florida Mutineers, those are squads that I really had to think long and hard about. I wasn't quite sure where exactly to put them. I think I got it right. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. But looking at Florida, they're a squad as of late that has been getting pretty impressive victories. And the more that they get from Havoc, the more they get from Neptune, they're a squad that could be very dangerous going into stage 4, stage 5, and eventually champs. Look at their hardpoint, S&D, control ranks. These are also ranks that have slowly but surely been rising up. You cannot see because my camera's in the way, but they're actually up 3 spots from where I had them just 3 weeks ago. Another really big rise just because if you look at the recent matches, 0-3 lost to Chicago, 0-3 lost to New York Subliners. So Chicago knocked them out of the tournament. New York Subliners dropped them into the losers bracket. But before that, they were on a roll. Had a win against LA Thieves, had a win against LAG, had a win against Dallas. Those were all really impressive victories. They also had a win in that group stage against the Minnesota Rockers. So this is just a squad. Anytime you have a really good flex and a really good main AR, they're just waiting for a little bit more from their SMG duo. And as soon as they get it, I'm telling you, this is a squad that can compete with the OpTics, with the Torontos, with the New Yorks of the world. I had them, I believe, 5th at the beginning of the year. That is where I thought they would be. They didn't show that initially, but they are doing so as of late. And one squad, which I think cemented their spot at number 4, because I'll tell you, before the major, I was not sure at all, is OpTic Chicago. I do have them down from number 3 a few weeks ago. And of course, they are one of the more talented squads in the CDL, but they went through that group stage period where they were not consistent whatsoever. They didn't look great in hardpoint. I think they had a 6 or an 8 map losing streak in hardpoint before they were able to finally get that figured out, which is just weird to see because they're the 4th ranked hardpoint team in the CDL. But you look at their recent matches, of course, they lost to Toronto, which was an incredible map. It went to map 5, round 11 before they ended up losing, but 3-0 win against Florida in that tournament losers bracket, 3-0 win against Dallas, 3-1 win against LAG. They were able to put it together and make a little bit of a losers bracket run. I do think that if they could have pulled that off against Toronto, who knows what happens? Would they have eventually ended up making it back to a grand finals? Nobody knows, but I do think that a lot of people were super nervous for where Chicago was at. And I think that as of late, they've started to shore up those things just a little bit. So we'll see what happens moving forward with OpTic, but I'm not quite as worried about them as I was just a week or 2 ago. With that, we'll go into our 3rd ranked squad, which might have cooled off just a little bit. They were the CDL's hottest squad, but right now I've got them at number 3, which is down 2 spots from where I had them at number 1, and that's the Toronto Ultra. Look at their record, 17-11 with a 67 and 50 map count, and the biggest thing with them is that if you look at like hardpoint, most of the time the teams that are above them are absolutely disgusting at hardpoint. Thing with Toronto is they're a 2-3-5 squad, right? Their S&D, they're 2nd. Their control, they're 2nd. In fact, when they ended up playing that map 5 S&D on raid against OpTic in that elimination, I just kind of figured it was over because I don't think there's many teams that can really beat Toronto on the map raid or in search and destroy overall. But that proved to be the difference. And if we look at their recent matches, they did lose to Atlanta before Atlanta went on and moved to the grand finals. But before that, got a win against Chicago, got a win against LA Thieves, lost to Atlanta to be sent down to the losers bracket, and then they got the win against Paris also. But this is a squad that I think has proved that they're pretty dangerous. I think that you put them up against Atlanta or New York or OpTic, I think it's almost just a flip of a coin, right? I think that they can compete with anybody they play against. Cammy has been unbelievable. I think going into this year, you knew what you expected or you knew what you were going to get out of Kleenex and Cammy, and those two have really held up to the test of time. Bance and Insight has come along. Obviously, that streak that Bance went on during the Stage 2 Major was a big part of the reason why they were able to win that 2nd major, and then Insight has come on And since he's been in the league, he has basically across all statistical categories been the best main AR in the league. We'll see if he can continue at that rate. But for right now, we've got them at number 3, which brings us to our top 2 teams. Number 2 is the New York Subliners. I have them up 2 spots from number 4 where I had them before. And of course, you look at their mode ranks, number 1 hardpoint team. They are absolutely disgusting at hardpoint, getting better at S&D and also getting a little bit better at control. I think that this is a squad that you bring in Hydra, and yes, that dude is absolutely disgusting, but it's really easy to play hardpoint because everybody plays hardpoint, right? It's just that mode where if you get into competitive, that's the first thing that you really learn, and it's the easiest to continue building composure with your squads with. I think as they get more and more time, they're just going to get better and better at S&D and control, and once they do, anytime you see these guys against the Atlanta Faze or the Toronto Ultra or OpTic Chicago or anybody else in that 5 through 8 range, I think that they have the potential to win those matchups, and they're showing that. They definitely did in this major. But you look at their recent matches, they did suffer the best of 9 loss to Atlanta in the grand finals, but before that, got a 3-2 victory over Atlanta to make it into that grand finals, and the path to get there: 3-0 win over Florida, 3-1 win over LA Thieves, 3-1 win over Chicago, 3-0 win over Seattle. They're just absolutely on a roll right now. They are number 2 in CDL points. So this squad deserves to be number 2, and that's what happens, right? When you bring in Clay and he's the person that you kind of build your franchise around, this is why he is such a proven and hot commodity in the CDL. They're just getting it done, and you have to give the man credit. It makes you wonder what might have happened had Dallas kept Clayster. Would they be in a totally different scenario right now? I don't know either way. It's just kind of what I'm thinking, which brings us to our number 1 squad, the Atlanta Faze. So last time we did this, I did have them at number 2 just because Toronto was on such a run, and Toronto did win that stage 2 major. But look at the records and the ranks here. They're 22-4 overall. They've only lost 4 matches the entire year. That is just bananas. 79-36 map record. You look at their hardpoint. The only team that's better than them in hardpoint is the New York team that we just talked about. Filthy at S&D, really good at control. Look at their recent matches. They got the 5-2 grand finals win over the New York Subliners, got a 3-2 win over Toronto. They did get knocked down into the losers bracket by New York, but win against Toronto, win against Dallas. I mean, these guys. And look, and by the way, I will say their run through the stage 3 major, I think, was much more difficult than New York's, and they were still able to beat them in the grand finals. These are the matches they played in the stage 3 major. It started and they got the win over Dallas, and then they got the win over Toronto. They barely lost to New York, and then they got another win over Toronto before finally getting revenge against New York. Whereas if you look at the run that New York had, they were able to beat LA Thieves. Okay, good team, but not one of the top 3 or 4. Beat Florida. Okay. And then they beat Atlanta to get them to the grand final. So if you look at the 2 different routes, to me, it feels like Atlanta had a much harder route, and they were still able to get that victory. So you have to give credit where credit is due. Atlanta has looked really good, and to me, they're back where they belong. I think it's pretty safe to say that they're the best squad in the CDL again, and they'll probably be there for this foreseeable future. So with that, there's another power rankings in the book. I cannot wait to see the group selection for stage 4. We have some more roster moves. We'll see where some of these teams end up getting taken. If you disagree or you agree, put your comments down below. I love having that interaction and those conversations back and forth with where you might have put teams that's a little bit different from where I put them. So make sure you leave a comment, leave a like if you don't mind, as it really helps out the channel. If you're new around here, hit that subscribe button. And with that, guys, thank you so much. We will see you in the next upload.